So now let's talk about when ads stop working. Okay. And so this is a thing we see a lot. Like I said before, like people will come and then, they'll go and sell 8 to 10 books, and then they try to increase the budget. They're like, because they think that what works at, that small scale to large scale, it's going to work at small scale doesn't work at large scale. And it doesn't, right? Typically it doesn't. And so one of the biggest things to first is like, we're going to have a checklist we do. So we have a client in the relationship niche, in the dog training niche. Yeah, he's in both, but he came to me in the dog training niche. He had the greatest offer, was running, doing really well. All of a sudden it stopped. We spent 2 hours with him looking through it, and then only to find out that ClickFunnels had an update which removed his pixel and it wasn't firing the data. Everything else was working, right? So the first thing basically is that to test is like your funnel is now, like all your tracking and everything in the funnel is working. You want to buy your own product. You want to go through the funnel. You want to check the emails. You want to check, you even want to check your credit card to see if actually the transactions took place, right? To actually make sure the transaction went through. You want to look at to make sure the pixel fired off, and you want to like pay attention to the pixel where it's firing off, and also like how you name your different things in Facebook to make sure the right thing that it's actually going through. Okay. The second thing is what Robert just talked about, is rebooting ads, because what happens is the way Facebook works is it works in it's a social graph. So like it puts people in buckets, right? And so if you have a bucket of buyers, you have a bucket of people interested in this thing, you have people interested in this thing, it'll put you in different buckets. So like and it always puts you in the most responsive buckets first. So like it'll put you in this bucket, and then you'll get certain results, and then it'll say, okay, let's try it in this bucket, and it won't work so well, and so forth. What happens is when you reboot the ads, it seems to just put you in the original bucket, and it does well again. And we've done this over and over, and for some reason it works. We don't know why, but it just works. Next is deep data segmenting. Like we talked about before, you want to look at all your reporting all the time, get really good at reporting. All these platforms has phenomenal reporting. You want to look at, the gender, who's buying. You want to look at the age. You want to look at the location. You want to look at the ads. Yeah, placements. Exactly. Like placements. So like the little sidebar ads, marketplace ads, whatever, yada, yada, yada. You want to look at all these things and find the most profitable pockets and double down on them, and then moving budgets from lower profitable pockets to other areas. Typically, like if you run the ads or the offer and it doesn't work in one thing, when you look at all the data, it's just not going to work in the area, and there's no point in trying to like outsmart it. Just focus on what works. Don't focus on what doesn't really work. The big idea here to take away is objective versus subjective data. And this is a principle we use in our Meta clients that really helps us and a lot of people we work with. And objective data is like looking at data and really looking at data and saying, okay, why is that, right? Objectively looking at it. And then subjective data is based on how you feel. 90% of people running offers out there, they focus on subjective data. They look at data and they extrapolate the wrong things from that data, and then they make conclusions that aren't right. So like people think they have a holistic problem, meaning like if you have a car and the car stops working, the car's no good, right? Well, maybe you just need to change this one part in the engine and the car is good as new, right? Okay. So typically in like systems or machines, it's a component problem. It's never a holistic problem, right? And we find that to be true everywhere. The problem is like when it comes to subjective data, you're like, well, maybe this other part doesn't work because I feel like that. And this is the number one reason people will start scaling offers and then just crash, and then they'll just give up and go back to a Facebook group or something silly and just start to sell from a Facebook group instead of having a predictable stream of revenue coming in. Or they'll go create like content, right? So like, let's say somebody's a YouTube creator and like, they're getting customers. They want to like, spread their wings and fly, I guess, higher, have more ads, and they can do really well. And if it stops working, what happens? They go back to creating content because it's risk-free, secure. Yeah, it's my safe area, right? But typically that comes from subjective data, right? And that's a very dangerous thing. The first step to it is understanding, is it subjective data or objective data? How do you know it's subjective data? Well, if you're sitting there and you're extrapolating reasons, right, based on what you feel versus looking at objectively and saying, okay, what's really going on here, right? So, Robert, what are some examples of this? I know we work with a ton of people, and like there's like so many like.
Oh, I mean, just for me alone, when we started running our first offer together, there were so many times where just the emotions got the better of me of, having a bad day and losing $1,800. And then, I was looking and feeling, making decisions based on how I was feeling, because that doesn't make you feel very good. And then what happens is when you run that ad, or when you reboot the ads or whatever, it turns out that there was no issue. It's just, this is the game that you're going into. And so the big thing to keep in mind here, and I kind of touched on this before, but if you've made it work at some point, that's a lot of proof right there. And so when it stops working, you should do everything in your power to not panic, to not freak out, and remind yourself that on some level, this works. Again, like Alan said, we have the car, right? Maybe your spark plug is fucked, but everything else is good, and you just need to go, get a new spark plug. So if you're able to make something work, just really keep that in mind, that it was working, and you just need to be able to take a step back. And if you need to hire some help, maybe go pay a Facebook ads expert for, an hour of their time or something like that, to get somebody with fresh eyes who is not emotionally invested the way that you are. Because the truth is, for most of you, doing this would actually be a very emotional journey, the way that it was for me. And it was so good to have Alan, who's done this so many times before, with the ability of just being like, look, you're kind of freaking out for no reason. Like, we have this one thing that's not working. Let's take a step back. Let's look at it. And sure enough, every time we did that, we were able to solve the issue and kind of proceed forward and so on. So I would say, when you do have this happening, when your ads stop working, again, especially if you've been able to make it work on some level before, just do everything in your power to not freak out, and get somebody who's unemotional about it to help you out. Like, even if you got to pay somebody for an hour of the time, it's going to be well worth it, because it'll happen a lot. Like, it's 100% going to happen. It's impossible not to have bad days where you're losing money, or ads that are working that stop working, and like all these things are going to happen. Ads account getting banned, like all these different roadblocks are going to be there. So just be prepared for that.
Exactly. So you can pay us to help you. I'm kidding. Only if you work, like hire a program. One of the biggest things, that, as far as objective data and subjective data, is like, and I see this happening everywhere, right? Like in the weight loss market, like people, for example, look at they step on a scale every day, and they're like, well, I'm not losing weight right now, right? And then it's like, you have to like really look at it in like a weekly or bi-weekly, or you have to look at it on larger timelines, right? Yeah. So what a lot of people will do is they'll go on an ad network, they get all excited because they have their offer or whatever, and they're like, I'm gonna go spend, $500 a day, and they lose $500, right? And they're like, shit, this sucks, right? And they're like, I don't want to do this, right? It's like they kind of touch the stove and they get burned, right? So you have to look at data in a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly. The longer time period you can look at, the better, right? So for example, like, we've had days where we made a ton of money, and then we've had a day where we lost like $1,800, right? And the thing is, if you balance it all out, you make more money, okay? That, money in, money out, more money comes in, then more money goes out, you win, right? It's the equation. So don't go spending, I don't know, like $500 in one day. Spread that budget out to 5 days, or $50 for 2 weeks, So that way you have like a safety net, which if it's not working, you just stop at $50 and you're like, okay, I only lost $50, right? Whatever to test, right? But remember, like when you're buying ads, what you're really doing is you're trying to figure out what doesn't work. You're paying for information, okay? Ultimately, you're not paying for sales, whatever. That's secondary. What you're really doing is you're paying to figure out what doesn't work, okay? So the rules of economics or the math clients is spend more money than other people. Don't lose money while doing it, at least break even. If you can do that, then you can optimize the business into profitability, okay? If you're losing money, unless you're like funded, somebody's investing, whatever, then you can't do it, because eventually you're out of the money, which is a resource, and you can't buy more ads, and it doesn't work anymore, right? Thankfully, we live in a day and age where you can kind of like pull money out of your ass by selling through different ways, like we talked about joint venture partners, etc. So that's a non-issue, okay? So objective versus subjective data, remember that, because the thing is, like one of the biggest things that one of these guys got in the program, it's like the things you don't know is what kills you, right? Yeah. And that's where you have to look at the data and say, okay, objectively, what's going on? Okay, not how I feel about it, okay? If something happens, remember, it's not the whole thing that's the problem. There's the component problem, right? Somewhere. Next up, once you have that, you got to figure out your bounce rate. Bounce rate basically means if somebody comes to your page, they bounce, right? So boom, boom, they're in and out, right? And typically what that means is that your headline or your top portion of your sales video or your first 15, 20 seconds of interaction is misaligned. So that's what happens, right? And like this typically happens, the high bounce rate I've seen typically happens when the ads and the sales copy are mismatched, right? When they're kind of two separate things. So like when people just create ads that aren't extrapolated from the sales page, you have a high bounce rate, because people look at the ad, they expect one thing, they come and they see a different thing, and it's like, what's going on, right? Yeah. So if you have a high bounce rate, typically that's the thing. Or you have complete weird targeting that's like off, like you want to sell to like, somebody, and like you targeting somebody else, some targeting is off, right? Okay. So yeah, pay attention to your bounce rate. That's important. Try different angles, so like we talked about, your ads are extrapolated from your sales page, have a bunch of different angles from the sales page extrapolated, and then also try appealing to different levels of awareness. And typically you can tell the different levels of awareness based on what other people are running in the marketplace, right? And so that's kind of telling. If somebody's running out there and they're making money or whatever, and people are buying, and on Facebook you can tell because you can just look at the comments and you can see what people say, etc. And then you can add a new mechanism to the product. So Robert, do you want to add anything to these three?
Yeah, just as far as the awareness and the adding new mechanism, just go back to when we talked about market sophistication and market awareness. There's 5 different market awareness stages, and the advertising for each one is, a little bit different as far as what you're talking about. And they're also very different sizes. So the people that are product aware and are ready to buy, they're the ones that are going to buy when you actually put the image of the book and throw some bullet points in there of what's included. So they're kind of like the low hanging fruit. But the truth is there's actually a much bigger market out there, which is people who are a little bit more unaware. So they're a little bit more difficult to get to and actually convert. But if you're able to do that, you're going to have a much bigger market. So that's why it's when you're testing different creatives, go back to the levels of awareness and try to consider that. So you're like, okay, well, I've only been running ads to people who are actually kind of aware of what they want. What if I can try to reach people who are maybe not even problem aware? They don't even know that they have a problem yet. If I can make that work, well, that's going to be really, really big. And also with the market sophistication, right? So we talk about how, I think I gave the example of the razor blades, right? So they just kept having to add new mechanisms to refresh the product. So they went from 1 blade to 2 blades to 3 to 5, and now they've gone back to 1 blade. So now that's the disruptive idea. Now that's the new mechanism, is 1 blade. So if you're in a market where it's kind of mature like that, and again, offer fatigue is much more rare than people think. So when your ads stop working, maybe you don't need to scrap the whole offer, but maybe if you added a new mechanism to the product, maybe that alone could help it. So
right, I want to add one thing to it. Like as far as like adding new mechanisms of offers not working, whatever, there's only one thing you really guys need to focus on, is make sure your product is actually working and getting the results, and that takes care of everything else, right? So if your product it actually works and people, like we talk about, 2 to 5% throughput, right? So if 1,000 people buy, 20 to 50 will actually get to the finish line, right? And that's not on you, that's on them. That's kind of human nature, right?
yeah.
But if your product actually works and does what it needs to do, okay, then you just need to kind of keep pushing that, because that gets people results, and you can start using the results as case studies, et cetera, to sell, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the biggest companies in the world, Apple, right? What's Apple got? iPhone, same interface, same design for 10 years, and it works really well, right? BMW, what do? They're pretty much the same thing. Like the cars look pretty much similar. I mean, they do facelifts and stuff. Porsche, they haven't they update their design every 10 years, right? Same thing. People buy every year, right? So if it works, make sure the product works for your audience, make sure it gets them results, etc. Make sure the mechanism in the product of getting the results works, okay? And then once people do it, it's like it works, and then you don't really need to focus on that. The marketing and advertising becomes easier, right? So like marketing and advertising is a function of a business. A lot of people think that I'm an online marketer, right? So whenever you take an identity of being an online marketer, you really take away the identity from being an online business owner, because you become this thing where you just focus on marketing. And I'm speaking from experience, right? And so like you get really good at marketing, but then you forget that, hey, marketing is a function of business. It's not the business, right?
Yep.
So yeah, just focus on having a great product that gets people results, that works really well. And how do you know if it's going to get other people results? Well, if it gets results for you, like if you use your product and you get the results, then that means others people can get the results, and then done, right? That's it. It's like if you build something and you can't get the results, but then you expect other people to get the results. And I know people that do this, very bad approach, right? So first off, it has to work for you, then have it so you can, a few other people. And the way you do it, you can go in one of these Facebook groups, whatever, and you can do a beta group, you can like, hey, let's try it out, whatever. And then you do it, because like once you have something that works, like the thing is today's day and age, like when you're running ads out there, like bullshit comes to the surface really fast, right? Like people whose products don't work, who don't get the results, don't last. Like they'll run these offers for like, for a little bit, but then like people in comments will buy it and they won't like it. Like the great thing about our offer that Robert did such a good job is that people would sell other people in the comments talking about it, and they'd be like, I thought this was bullshit, whatever, I bought it, it was great, I can't believe it's $5, whatever. And then like they do the selling for you, right? Because it works. So like a lot of energy should be put into the product. Actually the product working, the actual length, size of the product is irrelevant, right? As long as it works, gets them results. And then the ads and advertising amplifies that. That's what should be done. It shouldn't just be like marketing, selling shit product. It's not sustainable, because what happens is like if you scale your marketing, you also scale everything else. So if your product doesn't work, you scale a bunch of headaches and problems like chargebacks, refunds, customer support tickets, annoyance, people bitching, everything scales, right?
Yeah.
But if your product works and you scale that and you scale your advertising, then it's like you just sleep good at night, you feel good, people get results, and it's like a win-win for everybody, right? And that's all business really is. It's just an exchange of value, and then the whole purpose is to accelerate that exchange of value, right?
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I think that's kind of, an ideal place to be. But the truth is we only have 24 hours in a day. So one thing I will say on that is when you're starting out, you should just, get the product done. And so you can start selling it. And you should be spending 80% of your time on actually sales and marketing. But as soon as all the systems are set up, like, you got your funnel set up, the product is selling, like the order form is working, the emails are there, you should gradually switch over that 80% to the product. So it's very, very important to actually launch the thing. That's where most people get stuck. So that's why I say spend 80% of your time actually selling and marketing in the beginning. But then as Alan's saying, like in the long term, the sort of, quality of the product is going to be a deal breaker, because that's what's actually going to have, people go into the comments and convincing others to buy, and word of mouth and so on. And that's going to help you, in the long term. So yeah, there you go. That's how we think about advertising and running successful offers.
Yeah, so go do that. And then if you need help or anything, talk about it in a group, ask questions in a group, ask help. And this is just the reason we did it like this, and not necessarily just give you like a step-by-step, because again, like initially we, mechanically it's easy, right? Like, and creatively it's easy. Like anybody can go on YouTube or whatever and get some tutorials on ads, but strategically, nobody really teaches anything like strategically speaking. And that's where you really need to understand, like philosophically, strategically, how to approach advertising online.
Yeah.
Anybody can learn mechanics. Anybody can learn creative. It takes like 2 hours. I mean, I think in a weekend you can learn how to run ads, but strategy is something that you'll have to pay for, right? With mistakes, with time and everything. And so like this is our best way of helping you accelerate, compress, 10, 15 years of experience into what you need to know now. And now you have a basis of actually, building upon your own experience and then developing your own strategies and new, breakthroughs. So thank you. And we'll see you guys wherever we see you.
Ciao.